Hi, my name is Mike McKay. I'm going to be your guide through Formtasticus. Formtasticus is a form editing tool, and it also can render forms. So this is our main kind of form listing. You can see there's already a test Formtastic form on here, but we're going to create a new form. We're going to call this Patient Vitals. It's going to go ahead and create that form. And now we're on the form rendering screen. So what we can do here is we can edit the name of the form if we wanted. We can choose what type of user interface we want to render the form as. More on that in a second. Or we can add fields to the form. So let's go ahead and add a height field since we're taking a patient's vitals. We're going to look for their height as well as their weight. So I've just added those two things on here. And we can see we've got height and weight. And if we want to add some more logic or some validation to this field, we just use this drop down, and there's a bunch of different types of attributes that we can apply to this field. So one of the things that I like best about Formtastic is its way that it can do validation. It can help your data be good from as soon as it's entered. So that's what absolute min does. Is what's the smallest a person could be. Let's say we'll stick with centimeters, and we'll say 5 centimeters. And we'll go ahead and add that field. And what's the, and then what's the tallest they could be? Let's say 300 centimeters. So that gives us an absolute range. So we expect that there's no data that could ever fall outside of 5 to 300. But we also have something called a reasonable range. So the reasonable range might say that someone is probably going to be at the tallest, 175, let's say 225 centimeters. And the smallest they'll ever be is reasonably, 20 centimeters. Okay, so we've just established some bounds around the data that we're going to be expecting in our system. And I'll show you how that is actually plays itself out in a second. But then we could do the same thing for weight. We're going to make sure that no one is over 300 pounds, or keep 200 kilos if you prefer. The metric system. So what we've done is we've created a simple form, added a height and weight, and put on some attributes, some field attributes to that. And now we can render to see what it looks like. And you can see here we've basically rendered a simple HTML form with a height and a weight. And if we put in our height as 75 centimeters and our weight as 80 kgs, then that's great. But if we made a mistake and accidentally put 755, we can see that Formtastic applies that attribute. And it says data is not in valid range. It won't let me get off of this field until I fix it. So, okay, right, we did want it to be 75 or 78 after all. And you can see the same thing is happening with weight. If we try to put in 800, it's going to stop us. Okay, so that's basically how a little form can be rendered. I want to come back to our patient vitals page just briefly and talk about this rendering a little bit. So we were using Formtastic to render our form, but we could also use the touchscreen toolkit. It's going to take the same form logic and just make it look different when we render it. So now if we're rendering it, you can see it's actually rendered it as a touchscreen user interface. So if we were going to put in the height, we can now put in 55, and for the weight we can put in 80 and finish it. So those are two different ways that we can actually render our form. Just click on this test Formtastic. This is a more complicated form. You can see that it actually is using Ajax that allows us to get some suggestions going on, which is kind of nice. So we can click on all these things and we can move through and answer similar questions. Let's actually go back to the form itself and see what it looks like. It's a little more complex. and I can just talk us through what we have here. So we've got 4 different fields: city, weight, height, and sex. Ajax URL is a nice little attribute. It's how we manage those suggestions that were coming up. So you pass it a URL where it can get those suggestions from. And then for the weight, I've got a couple of more complex attributes in here, like this condition. This actually doesn't make a lot of sense. It's saying we only want to ask the weight question if the sex is not equal to a female. That doesn't really make sense because we don't ask the sex question until down here. But Formtastic allows us to rearrange fields quite easily. So now the sex question will come before the weight question, and the weight question will only be asked if the sex is not equal to female. And I think most of these other ones are fairly self-explanatory. But that's basically it. We can go back to our form listing. So I'm excited to see what you think about Formtastic. Send me an email. Again, I'm Mike McKay, and look forward to getting feedback from you. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.